We all know the NBA is about the superstars, right? But what happens when they're all gone? We're about to dive into this really fascinating late-season game between the Warriors and the Grizzlies that wasn't about the big names at all. No, this was a true battle of the backups, a raw test of which team's entire system could survive when its stars were forced to sit. And yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? When all the household names are just watching from the sidelines, who actually answers the call? This game sets up this incredible experiment. Which team's culture, which team's coaching, has built a roster that's truly ready for, well, for anything.
And I mean, just look at the talent that was sidelined here. For the Warriors, you're missing the entire heart and soul of their dynasty. No Stephen Curry, no Draymond Green, no Klay Thompson. And then on the other side, the Grizzlies, they were without their electric leader, Ja Morant, and a whole bunch of other key guys like Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart. You know, this wasn't just a challenge, it was a total identity crisis for both teams on the court.
So this whole game, it really just boiled down to one simple, kind of brutal question. Which team's depth was going to rise to the occasion? It wasn't about star power anymore. It was all about coaching, strategy, and the grit of the guys at the very end of the bench. And we're not just talking about the stars either. Both of these teams were absolutely decimated, with at least half a dozen regular rotation players out of commission. This was a scramble. They weren't just plugging holes. They were trying to build a whole new ship from spare parts, right in the middle of a storm. You know, in every tight game, there's always that one moment where it just breaks wide open. And for this one, it happened in a blistering second quarter explosion that completely rewrote the story of the game. The halftime score was 74-53. I mean, just look at that, a 21-point blowout by halftime. How on earth did a game between two depleted rosters get this out of hand this quickly? Well, it all came down to one unbelievable stretch of basketball. This is it, right here, the game breaker, a 29-8 run. Just let that sink in for a second. The Warriors didn't just pull ahead, they launched themselves into another orbit entirely, and the Grizzlies just had no answer. The game was, for all intents and purposes, over right there. And this chart tells the whole story, doesn't it? The Warriors poured in 40 points in that second quarter alone, nearly doubling up the Grizzlies' 22. This wasn't just a hot streak, folks. It was a full-on offensive detonation that left the game in smoldering ruins by halftime. So, how in the world did they pull this off without their future Hall of Famers? Well, it wasn't a solo act. It was a masterclass in what it means to be a team, with literally everyone stepping up. 8. That's the number that defines this victory. 8 different Warriors scored in double figures. This wasn't just a next man up situation. This was the entire roster up. I mean, let's just run through the box score. You had Jonathan Kuminga leading the charge with 21. Trayce Jackson-Davis was an absolute force inside with 19. Brandon Podziemski chipped in 19 of his own. Guy Santos added 17. And you had 4 other players also hit double digits. That is the definition of a total team win. And get this, the only player who didn't score in double figures was Malaby Leons, and he finished with 9 points. You almost can't even plan that kind of balanced attack. It just proves that every single player who stepped on that floor was a legitimate threat. A recap of the game really said it best. The Warriors stretched the margin to 32 and coasted to the victory. This wasn't some nail-biter. They established complete control early, and honestly, they never even glanced in the rearview mirror. So, what does one game in the middle of March really mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, for these two teams, this single night had huge implications for their playoff hopes and the whole story of their seasons. For the Warriors, this was absolutely huge. They're locked in a total dogfight in the Western Conference standings. Every single win, especially a road win like this, is pure gold as they battle just to stay in that playoff picture. But for Memphis, this loss was just another painful chapter in what has been a really brutal season. It marked their 12th defeat in just 15 games, a demoralizing skid for a team that has just been completely ravaged by injuries. And you can see the impact right here in the standings. This loss dropped the Grizzlies into a tie for 12th in the West, and that effectively just slammed the door shut on any faint playoff hopes they might have been clinging to. So the final score, 133-112, was the story of two teams riddled with injuries, but only one of them really had the depth to weather the storm. The Warriors bench proved to be the decisive factor, plain and simple.
Which leaves us with one lingering and pretty fascinating question. See, everyone in the league fears Steph Curry and the Warriors stars. But after a performance like this, do opponents now have to fear their bench just as much? Could this incredible depth be the hitting X factor that actually makes them the most dangerous team in the playoffs?